Welcome everyone to the Mobility Finance Network's February webinar. Today we're talking about meeting the investors behind mobility finance. Our guests today are Amit Patel, Ed Shapiro, Galina, Chifina, and Smitha. Moving right along, I'll introduce the MFN. The Mobility Finance Network is a community that connects people, ideas, and resources at the intersection of finance for impact, cross-border mobility, and human rights and livelihoods. My name is Elicia Carmichael, and I will facilitate today's conversation. My colleagues are here with me to support. I think many of you have met Prerna Chowdhury from prior conversations. Sheik is here to also answer questions and be available if you need anything. Great. So we have three areas of focus in this webinar series. Each of these contributes to a stronger, healthier, and more transparent mobility ecosystem. Today's conversation will cover all three of our focus areas: migrant finance, business support, and investments in technology. For those who are newer to the space of mobility finance, I'll share just one data point with you. In 2024, remittances to low and middle income countries reached 685 billion, and 2025 looks to be similar. That's far greater than philanthropic efforts and official development assistance combined. And if there's one major takeaway from today's conversation, is that there is ample opportunity to generate both impact and returns in the mobility space. And today we are extremely excited to bring together a star-powered panel of experts who understand that better than anyone. I'll now introduce our panelists roughly in order from impact first to returns first philosophies, though I will say that all of these investors seek returns. And having gotten to know them a little bit in preparation for today, I can also say that they all have enormous hearts and a passion for providing opportunity to immigrants worldwide. We'll start with Ed Shapiro. Ed Shapiro leads the Shapiro Foundation, focusing on refugee relief and resettlement. He comes from a career in investment management, where he was managing director for Par Capital Management, a Boston-based investment management firm. He is also deeply involved in the impact investment and financial innovation spaces and is an active member of the boards of Combined Jewish Philanthropies, Refuge Point, and Social Finance. He is also a member of the advisory council of the Mobility Finance Network. So thank you, Ed. Today, he will share perspectives on balancing impact and financial returns and highlight his investment in the income share agreement provider, Malengo. Next up, we have Smitha from World Education Services. She is the Senior Director of Investments at WES, an organization deeply committed to demonstrating a total portfolio approach for impact, with an eye towards reimagining broader capital markets. Smitha leads WES's investment practice, stewarding all of WES's resources to be 100% mission aligned. Smitha has worked in government, private equity, venture philanthropy, and impact investing. She is a Just Economy Institute Fellow and serves as a board and investment committee member to several organizations, including Mission Driven Finance, Echoing Green, the Unlock Ownership Fund, and New Power Labs. Next up, we have Amit Patel. Amit is the co-founder of Owl Ventures. He has served on the board of directors and led investments of many of the world's leading education technology companies. Amit has experience scaling several educational companies and is actively involved in helping Owl's performance companies reach a global audience, create high-quality solutions, and transform the world. He takes a hands-on approach in helping companies across numerous functions, acting as a partner in their success. He is here to share his vast experiences in the space of EdTech, specifically focusing on Owl's investment in Border Plus. And finally, we have Galina Chifina. She is the CTO of RTP Global and a partner at the firm. Her experience is concentrated in early-stage tech companies in India and Southeast Asia, spanning fintech, consumer internet, food tech, and agritech. Since joining RTP in 2007, Galina has played a pivotal role in expanding the firm's global footprint. She has helped RTP Global establish a reputation as a trusted investor for founders building e-commerce, fintech, food, logistics, and health tech. Galina is here to share her passion for investing in entrepreneurs, especially immigrant founders, and to tell us about RTP Global's investment in the cross-border job platform, Turn. I told you all, this is a very impressive panel. It was really exciting to put together all the list of accomplishments and experiences that these folks have had, and I'm really excited to move right into their experiences and some of the insights that they can share. I'm only going to ask three questions. They'll each take about 2 minutes to answer them, and then we're going to hand all the questions over to the audience. We have almost 100 people here now. More people will be joining. We have folks coming from impact investment, from tech startups, from international organizations, people who really know migration, and then people who really know finance. We have all kinds of people in the room. So please do submit your questions through the Q&A function, and Prerna and I will organize them and ask the panelists those questions as we wrap up these three that come from us. So to keep it simple, we'll go in the order shown on the screen here, starting with the Shapiro Foundation and asking Ed to please tell us about your investment philosophy regarding cross-border mobility, or in other words, why are you investing in this space?
Great. Thank you, Elicia. Thank you for including me. I'm honored to be a part of this group. Um, I think about investing in this space perhaps a little bit different than others. Even though I spent 27 years in the investment management industry, perhaps because of that, the vast majority of the investments, what we call investments in this space, I'm thinking about on the grant side rather than the asset side. For the most part, I continue to manage my foundation and DAF's assets in more traditional ways, looking to maximize long-term risk-adjusted financial returns, but spend a lot of time thinking about impact investing really on the grant side. Increasingly, we're looking for ways to structure our grants as either recoverable, giving us as high a chance as possible to recover as soon as possible the financial investments, the grants that we're making. And then in some other cases, maybe even have the opportunity of a positive financial return on top of that in the long term. At the end of the day, like everyone here, I assume my goal is to maximize the long-term impact of the work and the dollars that we have to share. I think I can do that most effectively by growing the assets, continue to contribute and have them grow in the long term, and then efficiently make larger grants, which I hope will have both substantial near-term social impact and ultimately financial returns that can be redeployed, reinvested into a combination of the existing programs to increase their scale and to catalyze new programs. While I'm very supportive of the whole field of impact investing, I've spent a lot of time, 10 years now, on the board of social finance, advancing this field. In most cases to date, I haven't been able to personally quantify that trade-off between social return and financial returns. So I take maybe the easy way out and I don't do that, and increasingly focus on the grant side, increasing the amount and the number of new investments that we're making that are program related investment, essentially have the returns expected, maximizing that on that impact, but focusing it on the grant side. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Let's go to Smitha.
Sure. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. It's great to be in conversation with you all. So from my seat working at World Education Services, we operate as a social enterprise. We've actually been in operation for over 50 years, and we were founded to really reduce the barriers to global mobility. We started to do that through creating credential evaluations and evaluating those credentials so individuals and particularly international students can move around the world. And we've really grown that business over the decades. And our organization has evolved since then. We've added other levers to our social enterprise approach. So we've added portfolio, which is our investments, philanthropy, policy, programs. We all think about these different levers for impact to drive ultimately change for individuals and also systems change. So from that perspective, I will say kind of the whole organization and operation of WES is focused on this question about cross-border mobility and how we kind of reduce the barriers for particularly immigrants. And so within our investment portfolio, as you shared in the intro, we have a total portfolio approach to our investments, which means that we're activating our full balance sheet to be mission aligned. And that is across asset classes. And so it does look a bit different in regards to how this plays out across asset classes, but happy to share some examples later in this conversation around how it's looking, particularly in our private market investments.
Thank you so much, Smitha. We'll go to Amit.
Yeah. Thank you for having me as well. Excited for the conversation that we're going to have today. And, you know, in response to your question, what I would say is, Al, we're exclusively focused on the education sector. And I think a big reason why we invest in this space is because when we talk about mobility, it's not just like kind of physical mobility that we're talking about and kind of movement of people from one place to another. But what we view is really opening up the possibility for having individuals access education opportunities as well as workforce opportunities that are not limited to a certain mile radius around which they live. And so for us, we think that there's a tremendous opportunity for technology to play a role here in making those opportunities available for individuals. If you look at kind of how individuals discover these types of opportunities or navigate them right now, a lot of it tends to be very fragmented in nature. It's very opaque in nature. And there's not like kind of clear ways for individuals to really access these types of opportunities. And so for us, kind of starting to find those companies that are starting to create some type of technology-driven marketplace or aggregation and infrastructure, basically, to kind of make this much more organized and much more accessible is a really interesting place to be. And what I would also add to that is, when we think about exciting places for us to invest, we start to really think about what are demographic shifts that are actually happening around the world that are undeniable and are going to be, requiring new business models to emerge. And, as an example of what I mean by that is, you start to think about, for example, where are the world's largest student populations? And so today, the world's largest student populations are in India and China. You kind of fast forward to where is the world's largest student population going to be kind of, 10, 20, 30 years from now, and that's going to be on the continent of Africa. And so as you start to think about where are interesting opportunities for innovation, both again within education as well as upskilling, reskilling, or that workforce segment, those are the types of shifts that we're looking at to start to identify where there might be interesting investment opportunities.
Wonderful. That leads me to many sub-questions, but we'll hold those until later. Thank you. Galina, what about RTP Global?
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me here. Such a privilege to talk about the topic, which is very important. The funny thing is that RTP doesn't have any philosophy around cross-border mobility, but we do have a philosophy about backing exceptional founders. And somehow historically, immigrant founders, and that's one of the sectors we particularly focus on, have had much higher success rates, probably because they do have a lot to lose, and they are very, very much agile to the reality, which is ever changing. So for us, impact is in the way we can back the founders who can change the world. And our main goal is keep doing that. The whole fund capital got created by reinvesting the capital we successfully took from exited companies and then basically refueling it back to the young, ambitious disruptors of the world. Now that's how we got into the topic of cross-border mobility. Like the portfolio company we've invested in was just backed by extremely passionate founders, and we couldn't stop ourselves by backing them.
Perfect. You just mentioned the passionate founders who are going to change the world. So let's take that into our next question with us. And Maho, you can move forward. So if you could each just tell us about a mobility investment that is particularly relevant to today's conversation. Tell us a little bit about the ticket size, what structure it took, and what are your hopes for the futures of those enterprises? And we'll go in the same order and start with Ed, with your focus on Malengo.
Great. I promise, Elicia, I'll stay within my 2 minutes, but rather than one, I'm going to just quickly touch on a few, and then we can obviously, depending on people's interest in the Q&A, go deeper. So the largest commitment we've made to date is in Germany, almost a $13 million 4-year commitment to our partner Malengo to support a TVET and university matching program for as many as 1,000 refugees being sourced currently from Uganda, Kenya, and Rwanda. Next, in Italy, we've made almost a $2 million commitment to a labor program that's run by our partners Pathway International and Talent Talent Beyond Boundaries. The plan there is to match over 2,000 refugees over the next 3 years from a growing list of source countries covering multiple vocations across Italy. Both of these programs are designed to recoup our investment over time through a combination of employer success-based payments and refugee/employee income sharing agreements. And then I'll just touch on three others where we're working. Our oldest, most established, is in Canada. Our newest, where I just returned, is in Brazil, and hopefully imminently launch another one in Spain. Stop there.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well done on the 2 minutes. And we do want to dive into some of those examples later in the conversation as well. Go ahead, Smitha.
Yeah, good to hear those examples, Ed. Talent Beyond Boundaries is also one of our close partners out West, and I see them in the audience here. So good to hear that. So I'm excited to share a little bit more about windmill micro lending. I'll say kind of just pulling back across our portfolio, we do invest across the spectrum of capital. So I don't think we fit in a perfect bucket of necessarily on one side or the other. I think some of the stories that Ed will share in those of, Amit, for example, will probably be within our portfolio and how we approach the world. But I'll say that Windmill Microlending is a really exciting partner. They were founded back in 2005. They're a nonprofit corporation based in Canada where they offer loans to help pay for the credentialing for immigrants and newcomers to restart their careers. And so over that 20-year history, they've been able to serve over 14,000 borrowers and have processed more than 150 million in loans during that time. So it's really tremendous. We have been a longstanding partner of Windmill. And while we did kind of support them through a community bond that they have, which is always actually in open for funding, so folks, if they're interested, can take a look, that they were also looking to launch a new pilot, which was offering Islamic-friendly financing structures to part of their communities. And so that had a different structure where they essentially had no interest bearing on those loans, and it was more Sharia compliant. So from that perspective, Wes also anchored the support for that. It was in that case, it was a zero interest loan, if you will, that we offered Windmill, but then they offered that cost base. They call it a cost plus loan to the newcomers to use for upskilling. And so that's a really interesting model for us where we have kind of a long-standing partnership with this offering private credit, and then we have added on a more catalytic investment to launch and demonstrate a new product within their portfolio. So that's a really exciting partnership that we continue to support in Canada and will likely continue to in the years to come.
Thank you so much, Smitha. And I'll actually add in that in our research at Labor Mobility Partnerships, when we were looking at what are the unlockers or the unblockers for immigrants being comfortable to move to a new territory when we talk about finance, it wasn't just do they have the capability to make the move, but can they access credit once they get there? And so having this kind of institution like Windmill, as people knowing that it's there for them on the other side of the ocean or wherever they're going to, is actually helping migration happen in a healthier way and helping people be less vulnerable. So I wanted to just give a small shout out to that because we're usually
That's absolutely true. And Windmill is also has several different partnerships to connect to immigrants kind of prior to their entry to de-risk the move, as you say.
Perfect. Wonderful. We'll move to Amit.
Great. Yeah, well, Border Plus is an investment that I think centers around some of those demographic shifts that I was mentioning in my initial answer to the first question. And so at a high level, the company is focused on helping and it's starting with like nurses that are in certain countries around the world find opportunities in other parts of the world. And a lot of this is centered around this idea that depending on what country you're talking about, certain countries have aging populations. There's a shortage of healthcare workers that actually exists, both within hospitals as well as, let's say, senior care facilities and other types of healthcare facilities. And so other countries have kind of a much younger population, and this type of opportunity of working in another country represents again, not just a tremendous opportunity for that individual, but it represents a tremendous opportunity for their family, for future generations, in terms of earning potential as well too. And so it's a really interesting company that's being started by a really talented set of co-founders. Mayank Kumar is somebody who was actually one of the former co-founders of Upgrad, which many of you may be familiar with, is a unicorn status company in India in the education sector already. And then his co-founder, Ayush, also has a tremendous amount of experience where he was kind of one of the GMs of Oyo, specifically for Europe. And so really brought a talented team together that not only understood, kind of countries like India, as well as the European market. So the kind of places where the nurses might be coming from, as well as the destination countries to where they would be traveling to. And so that's something that we're really interested in seeing in the founding teams that we are investing in, is that they really have an understanding of kind of the markets that they're actually trying to go after. And in terms of, when we got involved with this company, it was actually very early. We were the first institutional investor that Mike and Ayush actually raised capital from, and were there kind of investing in this company even before they actually ended up launching the product, or simultaneous to when they ended up launching the product, basically. And so this is a really exciting investment, and one that I'm actually in India right now because we were just meeting with the team over there shortly before this.
Thank you so much. And thank you for calling in after your whirlwind travel yesterday.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Galina, tell us about Turn. What's been going on there?
Yeah, I'm actually very lucky with Amit sharing exactly the same story. I'm going to be talking about Turn. So Turn is, and thanks a lot. I'll just piggyback on that. Turn is a very similar type of business. Also two founders. One is based in India, another one based in UK, but Indian, launched exactly the same platform for covering for the shortage of healthcare talent in developed world, and basically the access to this talent in India, both nurses and doctors. And there's a very deep personal story why they started doing that, and a lot of consequences of lack of professionals on the ground in UK and Germany and the rest of Europe. The good thing here is that the impact of this program is the Turn also trains the nurses, language training, qualification confirmation, education. So it's a very young company, but by now they've already trained about 1,000 nurses, and they shifted a few hundreds to Germany. So it's like when you look at the story of each of those families, which really is a life-changing, progress towards their dream. Many of them were willing to get there, and you kind of start thinking whether you're really a commercial investor or that's all about the impact, because the personal touch with all of their stories is so insanely deep and so insanely touching. So that's the company. Hopefully, will grow even further. We've been very happy with the performance so far. And again, the passion of the founders took it where it is. They're also expanding to Middle East. But in general, yeah, that's the story.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We'll move on to the next question. I think you've answered that quite fully. So thinking about what enterprises you would want to invest in next, who do you want to reach out to you? And which ones would you advise to wait a little bit until they're a bit more mature? What are you also not doing so that people don't use their time putting together applications that won't be successful? And Ed, yes, go ahead.
Great. I will just note, Elicia, it was great to hear the overlap with my fellow panelists. We've been a long-term partner of Windmills in our work in Canada, and more recently with Turn very deeply. My colleague was in Africa earlier this week with the Turn team, and I'm going out to Germany in a couple of months. So great to hear the subset, which is maybe a good lead in here, is our refugee-focused work, a subset of the larger immigrant labor mobility piece, but that is our focus. I took my very narrow and deep philosophy that I had in my investment management career, and basically brought that into the philanthropic space. Spent a couple of years looking at different areas and have been becoming more and more specific in our focus, which is basically what's known as complementary pathways for refugees. Basically, it is the deep involvement of receiving communities. Those could be family members, faith-based organizations, universities, and increasingly businesses to support their need or interest in supporting refugee resettlement. Our basic vision is that refugees need to be viewed more as assets rather than burdens or liabilities. And with the proper investment in them, will create win-win-win opportunities for, most importantly, the refugee families themselves that have limited or no future, the sponsors, broadly defined, and the communities, economies that they're participating in. The fact is, as we've all been discussing, every developed country in the world right now, populations are aging and birth rates are falling. That creates, from our perspective, short, medium, and long-term opportunities, need for more employees. Unfortunately, there happen to be a growing number of refugees across the planet, and they have little hope in most cases of having a future returning home, participating in burdened developing countries where they are currently living. So our goal is to unlock that potential, working with governments, nonprofit partners, and increasingly businesses where we can create efficient, scalable pathways to solve their needs. We're working in 5 or 6 additional countries, as I mentioned, and our hope is that we, with all of people on this call and others in our network, we're going to be able to identify new opportunities. You all come at it from slightly different perspectives, and what we've found so valuable is finding ways to leverage work that others are doing, where there are political and economic opportunities. We think that's a great opportunity for us to work. I'm very interested in scaling and accelerating the work in all of these developed countries where there is an openness and an appropriate match for refugees. So encourage anyone on this call who has now heard a little bit about what we're doing and how we're doing it to reach out to us if you have other ideas, other countries that are on our list, and we're looking to advance those wherever we can. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Smitha.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, I think we would love to keep learning from our other panelists, everyone else in this room around what are the other opportunities within the labor mobility space and keep exploring that set of opportunities. For WES, we, particularly in our private portfolio, we have really 2 sub-portfolios. We have a catalytic portfolio, which is what we consider patient, flexible, risk tolerant. And then we also have a thematic portfolio, which is seeking commercial rates of return, but is a global kind of cross sub asset class within the private markets. Overarchingly, we are mostly investing in funds, just given team capacity and our kind of typical check sizes. So it's almost like 90-10 funds with 10% directs. But I will say that we are standing up a strategic investing function at WES, where we're looking at ourselves as a strategic partner, growth partner for organizations, and that's where we're actually starting to do a bit more growth or later stage directs. And so from that perspective, happy to stay close. I'll say also, I'll put in the chat a link to our website, which has a lot of information about our investment work, but in this specific page on investment approach, it has also a link to an open call for ideas, which shares a little bit more about our parameters and what we're looking for.
Perfect. That would be really helpful. And to that point, if I could ask the panelists, when you get a chance to just drop whatever contact information you'd like people to reach out to, either to you or to someone else in your organization, to drop it into the chat, and we'll make sure we channel people to the right spot. Amit, tell us about the kinds of enterprises that you'd invite to reach out to OWL.
Yeah. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we are a education focused fund. And so we take a broad definition of what that means in the sense of it's kind of your traditional education, meaning early learning, K-12 higher education, but also kind of adult education, and kind of that bleeds into workforce development, upskilling, reskilling, and kind of that informal education sector. that really helps individuals kind of succeed throughout their career and kind of adulthood. And so we are stage agnostic, as I illustrated with Border Plus. Kind of we're investing at almost inception in that company to all the way growth stage companies that have kind of tremendously scaled revenues we get involved in as well. And so long way of saying that we're interested in meeting folks kind of at all stages. We are also investing globally. So, we have several investments in Latin America, Europe, Africa, as well as various parts of Asia. And so interested and eager to meet with folks all over the world, regardless of kind of what stage or scale you're at, and kind of make sure that we're developing a relationship for the long run, which is the last thing I'd say is, I think we very much view this as a long-term partnership that we're creating with founders and the companies that we're investing in. And so eager to hear more about what each of you are working on and kind of get to know you better.
Great, wonderful. Galina.
Yeah, for us, it's very simple. So those who are founders with a very, very early stage, but a very significant idea. So we, as a fund, backing the founders who can bring significant magnitude and both economically and in the life. That's who we're going to be backing. And the sector is probably less important. It should be tech, either deep tech or just basic software, AI, all these buzzwords, and a lot of passion. So we basically backing passionate founders who have really big ambitious ideas to bring the change in this world.
I love it. Big ambitions. We'll move to audience questions now. Maho, we can remove the screen so we can see everybody better. Thank you so much. And we have some great questions coming in. I'm sure more will come. But one that rose to the top for us was when you look at the investments that you've made in labor mobility or the ones that you hope to make in the future, what are some of the early signs that these will be successful operations, successful enterprises? And I won't force you to go into the order that you were in before. Feel free to just pop in if you have something you want to say. Maybe Galina, I'll go back to you and put you on the spot a little bit. You've talked about passion and of the founder. What else are kind of some of the parameters that where you say this is something that we feel like will become a successful investment?
A big market to tackle. Like if you are launching something on the market which is $100 million in total, and you get 5% of that, that would not be something we are looking at because the fund size is so large. To make a difference, we are backing basically the companies that can cross hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue one day. And the second one is a moat. Like, what is your right to win? And what is your right to defend your position, particularly in Ton's case and in general in mobility in the space. I think it's such a difficult topic that many companies who tried failed historically. So the mode here is building an execution muscle on multiple markets, on the markets you source the candidates, to the markets you place the candidates, and then enable the transition itself, enable education, enable housing, enable financing. So the mode here is a lot of heavy lifting that has to happen on the ground and cannot be easily disrupted by newcomers. So probably these two things: a large enough market with a passion again, and a competitive advantage and the mode that's going to protect or give you at least unfair advantage against the competitors coming behind you.
Right. Great point.
Yeah, that all resonates. I think the piece I would also add is just around the incredible market opportunity in this space. I think Amit was sharing some of the demographics and trends there. We look at that very closely, and having just been in operations in the mobility space for so long through our core business, we've lived through a lot of different eras and times, right? And the pandemic being one that was certainly a disruption, but now we're seeing another macroeconomic disruption. And so from that perspective, we're still seeing people are on the move, and we have high conviction people will continue to be on the move. And so the question is, how can we, through our investments, through technology, investments particularly, but then also through some of our more kind of products that are trying to improve inclusion and belonging and kind of upward mobility. How do we actually bring folks into the fold in an effective way that is not only good for kind of social inclusion, but also very much for economic opportunity as well. And so that's something that we're just continue to have high conviction about. I think maybe history gives us kind of solace that that will continue to be the case, and we've weathered many storms in the past.
Such a good point, Smitha. The story of humans is the story of migration. We've been migrating since we became a species. And I think that the benefit we have now is this technology and the funding behind it, and we can get really smart about how we communicate. So thank you for bringing that up. I think it's a really good point. Ed, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I guess it's a little hard to generalize, but I would say one common theme is scale. Lots of interesting niche products. You have to start somewhere before you end somewhere else, but where we're diving in is where we see the long-term potential for scale. And I would say, personally, I also want to see some immediate short-term opportunities. So when I match those, there are places like Germany and Italy, as I mentioned, that have both of those. We are scaling now, moving from hundreds to thousands to hopefully tens and hundreds of thousands. And there are others that are more nascent, places like Japan, which have historically been very, very challenging for immigration generally and refugees specifically. But obviously a very large economy with some of the most challenging demographics. So my willingness to invest where there are some small programs. We have a couple of partnerships that are measured in dozens a year, but willing to invest at least a modest amount of time because there is that potential. If we do this, if we can both prove in other countries that are scaling and get to a place politically, economically, where we can grow that, I'm willing to invest more. So I think that it's that combination that I'm looking for. And again, we're in 6 to 8 countries now, and I do think there are others where we can identify, and particularly in Europe.
Wonderful, thank you.
The couple things that I would echo and slash add from the other panelists is I know Galina was talking about like kind of founder passion. I also think like founders' insight or expertise or lived experience. Those are things that we're really interested in, especially if it's an earlier stage company and there's not like a lot of traction or historical performance of the company to base that decision on. And, kind of demonstrating what is that unique insight or aha that this entrepreneur or set of founders have had about the problem that they're actually going out to solve. So I'd probably say that's one thing that we're looking at. The second thing that I'd mention is, something related to outcomes, either for the workers or employees or whoever it is that is kind of migrating from one country to another. Because I think our belief is that like if you are able to point to some long-term demonstrable impact that you're having on outcomes for these individuals, that is what's going to lead to kind of a sustainable moat, if you will, right? As I think if you're just doing something that seems more transactional in nature or a one-time type of interaction, and you're not delivering a whole lot of value, then I think it's pretty easy that these businesses could be disintermediated or disrupted in some format or commoditized in some format. And so that is a second way that we're kind of looking at businesses to try to determine which ones are more interesting and the ones that we ultimately do actually invest in. And so those are probably two things that I would add to what the panelists have already shared.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I'll add an audience question we have coming from Rio de Janeiro. We have a question I think builds on this one nicely. which is we're talking about scale and the ability to reach scale and to embed with the organizations that you're funding. So the question we have is, how do you balance patience for systems change? So it could be like the entire ecosystem of where you're working with policy and whole systems not set up with training or accreditation being aligned, all of the things that kind of wrap around the businesses that you're working in. So how do you balance patience for that kind of systems change with the pressure for a measurable ROI? And being able to be predictable in the way that you think that the business will grow and expand, especially when working in developing economies and contexts. Maybe I'll point to you on this one, Ed, just because I know it's something that you've thought about. We've talked about a little bit about before.
Yeah, I guess people don't usually use the word patient and me in the same sentence. I am, in fact, quite impatient and anxious given the needs that I see out there. But at the same time, I'm investing long term, and I recognize, or I'll grudgingly admit that a lot of what I want to do can't be done overnight. And the reality is, these are long term demographic, economic opportunities that can't be, in most cases, repaid instantly. Although in some cases, I think we have found ways to kind of give me that instant gratification while at the same time investing in 10, 12, 15-year projects that realistically are going to take that amount of time to be able to have a repayment, a return on that investment. So I'm trying to balance all that, I guess, and where there are opportunities and requirements to make substantial investments, Malengo maybe being the best example. Germany is a really important country, a large economy, a significant labor shortfall. There was an article someone sent me yesterday in the FT about how much there's been a miscalculation. In fact, Germany is facing much larger population shortfalls and worker shortfalls expected over the next 10 years than previously estimated. And so I think we have the answer to that it is like capital, like natural resources that can move. If we can do that, there is this win-win. So I'm hoping that we are in a position to make investments. In the case of Germany, language is a significant challenge. I've yet to meet a native speaking German refugee. So we have established with Malengo support to teach German language at scale to refugees in various contexts, where I hope that we're going to be able to be innovative, use technologies, apps to do this at greater scale than we have so far. But it is an investment that is required to enter the TVET programs. You have to have a certain level of German. So we're doing that. On the other hand, places we're working with, Elicia, you and your colleagues, in Spain. Spain has some significant advantages right now in their economy. They are growing fastest growth in Europe, and they happen to have and politically extremely pro-immigrant, pro-refugee, which works really well. And the fact is, there are a very large supply, depending on how you count it, at least millions, if not tens of millions, of Spanish-speaking refugees from former colonies, right? From Venezuela and Cuba in particular, but also Nicaragua, Guatemala. That pool, I'll call it for these purposes, is an advantage. They can pop right into Spain, have the same culture, language, religion, and not have the kind of transition to this. It's of course, can be traumatic, leaving your home, moving to a new country, a new continent, but at least having the same sort of language and culture. So that's very different context across the spectrum, and we're looking for all of those. Italy is in between. A modest amount of Italian required for some of these jobs. Will benefit from increased Italian post-arrival, but we have a nice mix across our portfolio.
Wonderful. Yes, not easy to find the pathway. We've worked on that together, and it's not easy to find where are the returns for the worker, because if the worker's not finding a great margin for themselves, then the business itself is probably not likely to have much wiggle room in terms of their own margins. Smitha, I see you've come off mute.
Maybe I'll just offer that it's also so important to meet the organization, the founder, where they are in their stage and right size the structure of capital and kind of to what you're saying in the context. And so from that perspective, I think it's served us well I think everyone on this panel would agree that sometimes when we're talking about scaling up, we're often using mindsets around maybe venture scale, but venture scale really is for an extremely minority. It's a very small minority of all organizations that would achieve such scale, right? And so we have to be quite disciplined to understand when is that the right capital structure for an organization, or when is something like private credit or a blended finance structure or grant, as Ed was sharing, or another type of structure more appropriate. And so I think that this group has been able to discern when maybe venture was the right fit and was able to really scale and grow an organization in that way. But there's also the concept of scaling out versus scaling up, and sometimes those other structures that we kind of explored in our catalytic capital portfolio are more effective in that regard.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I think, and just this building on what Smitha just said, I also think, kind of as you think about maybe shorter term bets that you could see a benefit kind of in the short term versus, let's say, these systems change, which Elicia, you were saying is kind of more longer term. I also think it's really important to take into consideration how much capital you have raised and kind of what the runway you have as a company is. I think in the discussions that I often have with the founders that we have invested in or the board discussions, kind of once a company has raised around, I think like the one of the things that I like to encourage founders to do is like, let's think about when is the next round going to be? What are those success metrics that you feel like need to get achieved to set yourself up for that round? And some of that can be, hey, here are some short-term goals that we need to achieve to show a certain level of traction, to show that we are able to execute, and to show that we're on a certain trajectory. And some of that could be, hey, listen, this is a longer term that we're willing to investment that we're willing to make. And we do want to show some level of progress along that, but we're not going to have reached necessarily the final destination that we're getting to, or we're not going to have built everything out that we're hoping to. I think where things get tricky sometimes is if you've only invested in those longer term bets and you're starting to go from, let's say, the C to the A to the B, the likelihood that, let's say downstream capital is willing to give the benefit of the doubt that that longer term vision is going to be achieved without seeing some at least short term bets paying off is just harder and harder. It's not to say that it's impossible, but a lot of times that might require a second time founder to have like investors say, hey, this is somebody that I'm willing to kind of bet on and invest in and see that longer term vision through, or some other type of unique set of circumstances. And so, just kind of taking that into consideration is something that is a discussion that we like to have a lot with the founders that we have invested in.
Wonderful. And Galina, maybe instead of answering this question, I might go to you to start the next question because I know that you've thought about this one. One of the big challenges in the mobility space is cash flow, just liquidity of the system itself. So we have all these upfront costs, but the benefits accrue much later in the process of migration. So the employers get benefits later in the system when they have a worker come and stay with them and be retained. The workers get benefits later in the system when they start to be paid at 5 to 10x what they would have been paid at home. And so we have a question from the audience that fits in with that puzzle, which is what financial tools and models are working in liquidity management for this puzzle of the migration system. And I'll kind of quote it more directly. But how do we align incentives and balance risk across the different stakeholders? So employers and workers contributing in different ways under different legal frameworks. How do you think about your investments and the businesses that you're working with in terms of balancing all of that risk, cost, time, those really complicated dynamics? Sorry to throw this one at you, Galina. I see you smiling. It's the question, right, of mobility finance. So what have you done to try to build a solution around that space?
That is a fantastic question. And I would say for us, probably that is one of the biggest challenge of this market. If you would think about a lifetime of one nurse being placed in a hospital or care house and being paid for, it is a 9-month cycle. So on day one, you find the nurse, you screen all of them, then you train the nurse, then you hopefully place the nurse, then there is a long immigration process, all the visas. Then the nurse arrives, and hopefully the hospital still needs a nurse. And then the nurse may not be the nurse the hospital actually wanted because they hired her 6 months back remotely. And then she also has to figure out where she lives and does she even want to stay with this hospital? She actually wants to move to some other place. And the provider of all of that gets paid in case she stays in the hospital for 3 months. Okay, like think about that. So the working capital financing for this particular circle is insane. Now, how we started to think of, first of all, of course, there are these financial tools, and you can do all this venture debt, you can do BNPL solution, you can do credit, and all of that is used. Pretty expensive in Europe, but you can also play around part of businesses in India. In India, the financing is much cheaper. So you can do this arbitrage. But in reality, you cannot avoid this working capital. The only way to do it is to shift the business model to subscription. A hospital knowing, or a B2B customer knowing how many nurses they need in a year, in a week, in a month, can sign up for subscription. And basically, the moment it is subscription business, the financing happens a bit more regular, and then the company can survive. I think we're still very far away from this model because to pay subscription, you need to be sure you'll get your service, right? You wouldn't pay for your Spotify if it's kind of patchy and one day it works, another day it doesn't, and then maybe the track is something very different. So for now, what we figured out is that, and that's probably also partially answer to the previous question, the world does not end in one business model. The moment you learn supply and demand, you actually start discovering a plentitude of opportunities inside. You have software for screening. Can you sell it? You have training facilities. Can you monetize it? I'm not talking about monetizing towards the candidate. And in case of Turn, what I really love about the founders, immigrant founders, again, right, is that it doesn't stop them. The regulations, by the way, are also not stable. They can change. They can change for worse, not necessarily for better, right? So if they stay as it is, at least thank you. At least we can predict it. So in this reality, you can enter new markets. You can enter new verticals. You need to find the path to finance yourself till this moment of blessing comes and all that starts properly working. Because also a balance of demand and supply right in time, right? So my answer is like, don't stop yourself at one particular use case. Try figuring out what else parts of the chain can be monetized, can be used to support the business functions. And one day we would all be living in a subscription-based world and everyone's going to be happy, but this is still far away. Turn launched in Middle East, which was not even the place in the map which they were focusing on, an AI assistant to screen nurses who are entering Middle East for working here. So it's not anymore a human. It's an AI assistant who is basically asking the same question and assessing whether it's a proper candidate or not. Why did they do that? To cover up for the cash flow gap that is happening from the main business. And that's amazing. That's a beautiful story. So stay innovative and reinvent yourself till the cash flow is going to get solved one day somehow.
Okay. Maybe I'll give you 2 minutes and then we'll start to wrap up.
Great.
Unfortunately, we can't hit all the questions.
Yeah, I want to follow up on Galina's points because it's something we think a lot about. Came from the investment world where we think about risk and reward. And the reality is nurses in particular, although there are other professions, are a certain a market as I think there could be. We're all aging, whether we like it or not. And we know with very high accurate certainty, at least for the last 18 years, how many 18-year-olds we're going to have, just to pick a number, entering the workforce. So there is a certainty, and I would argue, although maybe people have predicted this before, that nursing is as immune to AI and technology changes, as well as economic forces. This is not interest rate sensitive, cyclical industries. Those nursing care facilities, those hospitals know with pretty good certainty over the next year, 5 years, 20 years that they're going to need a lot more nurses. And it's pretty certain in almost every country they can't satisfy all of them. So they need immigration. We need a model to do that. There happen to be a large number of refugees, as I said. And so what sort of investment banking function, there is an investment required, and there is an separate and aside from the humanitarian, there is an economic benefit to the employers, to the economies, and to the refugees themselves. How do we create models that give us the best chance? The combination of success-based employer pay, if we are solving a business need, our premise is they're going to be happy to pay for it. They're going to care about success and predictability, and then it's going to set retention. So we have to build models, whether it's subscription or retention bonuses or various combinations of economic models, coupled with our premise around income sharing agreements. We are providing an substantial economic benefit to these refugees, and if the success is realized and they earn a certain level of income that they know ahead of time, well informed, sharing a piece of that future economic returns back to pay it forward so that more of these can be done. That to me is the ultimate scalable model.
Wonderful. Well said. Well placed last words. Thank you so much. I just cannot thank you all enough. This has been so interesting, and I feel for the participants because we have Aditi and Sorsha and Laura and Ravod and many other people on our chat who have asked questions that we haven't been able to get to. We will compile those questions and we'll try to figure out a way to get to some answers. We're just going to wrap up now because everyone does have to drop off, and say again that, as I said in the beginning, we have a spectrum of different investment philosophies represented on today's panel. What they all have in common is that they're looking for financial sustainability, and they all, like I said, have enormous hearts and just so much passion for investing in passionate founders and life-changing solutions. And so that really came across in everything that you shared. And again, we thank you so much for being here. I just wanted to do a brief note on what's coming up next. We've been in the pattern of doing one webinar per month. Next month, we're actually meeting in person. So those of you who are in DC, will please reach out to us, but we'll also be posting online. You can follow our LinkedIn page to learn more, but we'll be meeting in person to discuss the fall of American big aid and the rise of the private sector in mobility investments, among other things. One of the questions that we didn't get to talk about was does aid, NGOs, development organizations, how do they sync up with this private sector so that we can all be more effective together? We'll talk about that in Washington next month. And then we'll be back online in April, and we'll be sharing more information about who's coming on board for our next webinar then. Again, thank you so much for our panelists, and thank you to the audience for your amazing questions and engagement. We will be in touch, and we'll see you in April.